min kjære kollega og venn Sir Peter Gluckman, som da er president i The International Science Council. Så nå skal jeg stoppe det her. Sånn. Da får vi se og gå videre med det. Well, Peter, it's a pleasure to have you here and to address our friends up in northern Norway. And I can tell you that in my presentation, I ended up with a Latin quote, nullius in verba, don't take anybody's word for it, which has been used by the Royal Academy, I think. And something that is typical for science, or what would you say? What is your...
Well, as a fellow of the Royal Society in London, which of course has that as its motto, which was written in 1660, it was actually at the core of science, and that is that science has always organized skepticism, and its knowledge claims in science require that they're exposed to other people and they're evaluated, tested by others before they become accepted knowledge.
That is impressive, 1660, so this has a long tradition. Now, Peter, some of the major concerns in this meeting here is about integrating indigenous knowledge. So do you have any comments about the role of indigenous knowledge in science? Maybe do we have to think about a new way of doing science, or any associations there?
Well, I think the reality is that there are multiple knowledge systems in the world, and they all add value, but they have different purposes, different histories, and contribute in different ways. And at the core of science is that it's based on empiricism, on observation, on testing, as we said, on peer review, and relying on explanations that in turn depend on reality, logic, and past observations. And they cannot appeal to something that is not understood, such as divine power. Indigenous knowledge has much of that in us as well. Also done, there's generations of understanding the best way to manage reindeer herds or whatever else. But it's also built on explanations that might go beyond that, and they're built on more informal ways of observing rather than the formal ways of science. But that doesn't mean that they have any less validity in the context of where they are being applied. Science's validity comes because it tries to look at more general and complete things. Local knowledge creates its validity in the local context. A carpenter has knowledge that an engineer does not have. That's tacit knowledge. And I think what's gone wrong is scientists have had hubris, they've had narratives, they've not been willing to listen to what others who have better knowledge in their context and their system have. But equally, in some knowledge, some owners of knowledge, for instance, religious knowledge in some places, have not been willing to understand the particular aspects that science brings to it, with its acceptance only of what I call shallow explanations, not appealing to a higher power.
And so this is very interesting. Would you also, I hear basically behind this that you're saying, well, we need to integrate that in order to meet all the big challenges that we face nowadays?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, science can tell us a lot about global warming or biodiversity loss, but when it's brought down to the particularities of the ecosystem in northern Norway, for example, it's only those that have local knowledge and combine what we can learn from modern science with the local knowledge of what happens in the seasons, what happens as the reindeer migrate, what happens in the snow melts, that you can actually make a difference and actually find practical on-the-ground differences that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or which will reduce biodiversity loss, or any of the other grand challenges we're dealing with. It needs that combination of what science can bring and what local knowledge brings. And if they're not brought together, we will not make progress.
That's very interesting, Peter. And I, as you know, I share your view. Let me just ask you one last thing, and that is about ethics in here. Do we need more guidelines to actually come to a larger respect of other viewpoints, of other sources of knowledge, maybe other value systems also? Is there something in us that very often ends up in conflict because we may not have the right attitudes to that?
Well, I think that's a very, very deep question, because you could argue that the history of Europe over the last 2,000 years has been conflict between different sets of values, one religion versus another religion. I think that science, and we've seen with Twitter and other social media, the reduction in the willingness to have respectful discourse and find agreement between people with different worldviews and different identities. And clearly, your experience and the experience of the Sami people are different. But as you bring that together, perhaps it can make a great difference. But it requires work and hard work on both sides, because the framings you come from the start are different.
Yeah.
And it needs to be respect without compromising your own identity. All said and done, if you're a scientist, you're trained and you must work against those rules, the principles of science about empirical observation, open observation, contesting constructively, using shallow explanation. If you're a person from an Indigenous community, you want to protect your identity, your values, your cultural beliefs, etc., etc. But they need to respect each other and understand they each have a place in making a better world for all of us. And whether that's ethics, whether it's understanding the place of each, it's a fundamental change in society needed. So we have civil discourse. Now, as president of the International Science Council, I believe that the Science Council's role is twofold. One is to protect what is science, so that we can contribute to the world in the way that science can. On the other hand, it's to make sure that we're not arrogant, that we don't exhibit hubris, and that we open and welcome the other knowledge systems to work with us to make a better world. And if we do that, then we will make progress. But institutions of science have to change and evolve. Institutions of society have to change and evolve. And we all have a collective responsibility to do so when there's lots of interests and institutional impediments to actually getting there. So whether it's ethics, whether it's saying we need new modes of doing science, such as transdisciplinarity, that for those questions that are more than technical or technological or reductionist, we actually need to find a new way of working, and that requires institutional change, I think.
So thank you very much, Peter. I think we have to stop here with the call for more hard work ahead of us all. So thank you very much, and best greetings to you people in this meeting. Bye-bye.